we have Christa Salamandra, professor of anthropology at CUNY, and she is an expert on Syria, so she might want to say a couple of words before we open it for questions.
Well, what touched me most about the film was the notion of suffering having become naturalized. And people are, once they're, at the same time that they're broken, they've also endured and are able to articulate. So that's kind of an amazing achievement.
You use the key word internalize, like it's as though it's part of their nature. It's as though it has become second nature because they've already been exiled once. They've already been homelessness, the idea of being without any roots or without any belonging and all that, and then suddenly after all these years the circle is being repeated. And as though suddenly you say, well, is it in the genes? They know how to cope with this, but whether that's might be the case or might not be the case is not the issue. And so I guess it's very, very difficult, and I don't know if anybody has an answer to what's going on, because it seems like it's a never-ending situation in Syria.
And I just like to say that the Palestinians are leaving one of their most comfortable homes, or one of their most comfortable temporary homes as they think of them. And many of the Arab regimes over the years have used the Palestinian cause for political purposes in their rhetoric, but very few of them have actually matched the kind of hospitality that Syrians had. It wasn't hospitality, that it became their home. You know, they were given basically the same rights that citizens have, and they could work, and they could go to school, and they could be part of the government. And this didn't really happen anywhere else. So they're leaving the most comfortable and accommodating and inclusive Arab society that any Palestinians live in. So that's part of what makes it really, really difficult, and particularly sad for the Palestinians.
Yeah. It's like a second home. I mean, you've lost your home and then you've built yourself a second home, and you're kind of saying, okay, if I can't have that one, at least I have this one, and then suddenly the carpet is, you know, pulled away from under your feet. So it's really hard. Let's see if anybody wants to join the discussion or ask questions, or is there anyone who would? Yes?
This question, watching this film really made me realize how just utterly uneducated I really am about just everything. When I hear about, you know, the conflict in Syria, I think almost of it being about Syrians themselves and not realizing there's so many other just groups and people affected. Do you have a recommendation of where you would start in terms of historically, or, I mean, you can't really trust much, you know, out there in terms of facts and information, but do you have a trusted source that you would recommend to really start from 1948 to really just to become educated on the roots and origins of how this film came to be, or the issues inside this film?
Is everybody heard the question? Do they want a summation, or it's okay? Oh.
Yeah. Well, there are many good academic books and articles, but I think the first place to look would be two websites. One is Electronic Intifada, and the other one is Jewish Voice for Peace. And both of them have excellent, particularly Jewish Voice for Peace I'm more familiar with, they're excellent educational resources, and very good sort of brief histories.
The first one you mentioned, could you just electronic?
The Electronic Intifada.
Intifada.
The other thing is in the Middle East Report, MERIP. There's an article that has been updated recently called Palestine for Beginners. And that's also really excellent.
That's very informative, and also, as you noticed, Christa gave us both sides of the, so it's not just the Palestinian point of view, but
Well, actually, to be absolutely clear, Jewish Voice for Peace is a very pro-Palestinian cause group, and probably the most of any of the left-leaning Jewish organizations in the States. So I just don't want everyone to think I'm talking about both sides of the Palestinian situation, because both of those.
Both sides. It's very difficult to say both sides when. Anyway, we won't comment. We'll let you participate. So, any more questions or comments or discussions? Yes?
Just a question. At the beginning of the rebellion against the Assad regime in Syria, did the government take an official stance against its Palestinian community, or were they just fleeing like any of the other Syrian populations?
No, actually, not that I'm aware of, and indeed many Palestinians were throughout the conflict, and still are pro regime, because of that, the history of feeling comfortable, feeling at home, feeling like it's the one place, and it's first of all, it's very near Palestine. And it's the one place where you can live a full and meaningful life and work and a sort of semblance of a normal life, anyway.
Yes.
I think the one thing that struck me was the Palestinians kept referring to Yarmouk as a camp. But it was not a camp. It was 4, 5, 6 floor. It was a suburb of Damascus. And yet they still didn't call it their city, their home. They kept saying, this is a camp, this is a temporary place.
And that's the way it's known generally in Damascus. People would talk about Mukhayyam Yarmouk. They wouldn't say the neighborhood of Yarmouk. Even though it is a neighborhood, it's still camp. Metaphorically.
Yes, and it tells you a bit about the psyche and how these things become, from one generation to the other, all these connotations and pass on, and how, even though it's not a camp in the real sense of the word, for them that's what it connotates. Yes?
I think because it started like a camp, like how Zatari.
Yeah.
It started like camps, but when it takes too long, so they build like buildings.
Also, a camp, when anybody refers to something as a camp, there's always the temporary, ephemeral quality of it, even if it's a brick and mortar building, but it's still not really permanent.
And the Palestinians were also allowed in Syria to have their own identity, even though they were made to feel Syrian. They were allowed a specific identity, and I think that that's part of the reason for the continuance of the use of words like camp, by all Syrians to refer to places like Yarmouk. So.
Yeah. More questions? Yes?
I have comment about the first movie. It's like showing only one side of the war or the story in Syria, because there is another. It's a civil war, so there is the regime. He has like a criminal, and the other side, Free Syrian Army also. He did like many things and many crimes in Syria. So I think the first movie showing only one side or one opinion.
Just bias.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, I can't comment on that because I'm not the filmmaker.
Yes.
But the reason why it's here is because it showed a point of view, and we are a festival which allows people to express their points of view, and I thought it's an interesting pairing, because you see the situation and then you learn what's happening with the Palestinians. But you're right, yes, we need to. And then, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Samir.
No, the lady before, no, the other. Yes.
Me.
Yes.
Me.
No,
I'm
yeah,
Patricia.
yeah.
I'm Stephanie.
Stephanie.
Hi.
Yes, just as Stephanie pointed out before, it triggers a desire to go out and learn more.
Yeah, it's sorry,
So-
just linking into that, sorry. Just talking about the sources, you had something to say there?
Yes, I think we're being signaled that we should be moving
That,
on.
but
yeah?
also, please check only American View as well. Just, what is it? No.
Yes, Blaming the Victims by Edward Said, the authority on Palestinian issues. But it's very, very important to remember these things. See, if it triggered the idea or the desire to go out and find out more in one member of the audience, that means this screening was successful.
And just as a last word, this is a great point and a great moment to end the discussion, because every documentary film I've seen, almost every article I've read is partial. And I don't mean biased, I mean it's a partial story, it's one snapshot. It was very much like that when I was doing fieldwork in Syria in the early 1990s, that I felt like it was whiplash. I'd be told one very, very different story and set of experiences by one group of people, and then another one, very different, seemingly equally valid, but a lot of discord, a lot of difference. So I think the answer is to read a lot and to look at a lot, and to recognize that each documentary you see, each article you read, is kind of like a snapshot